Evening. I call this meeting of the Town of Thompson Planning and Zoning Commission subcommittee meeting on zoning regulations to order. It is Tuesday, June 9th, 2020, at 6:02 p.m. We will begin with a roll call of members. Mr. Werge.
Aye.
Ms. DeRogers.
Missy DeRogers here.
Mr. Lenke.
Present.
Mr. Krogel.
Present.
Ms. Langlois.
Charlene, you're muted.
Gotta unmute yourself.
He's
Sharon.
muted. I'll unmute her.
Here.
And Mr. Santos.
Brian Santos here.
Mr. Hill.
Elvin Hill here.
And Joseph Prody Brown present. Okay, so we will begin with we will continue with the discussion of the comments received. Going off of the guideline that the planner sent out this morning. I think the first, so I'm having a hard time. Oh, the first item is from the revisiting of the discussion we started last week. Tira has signed up for an account with editorworld.com, which would provide professional editing services. She's estimating a cost of $600 to $700 for the entire document. Last week, John Rice indicated that that's well within the professional services budget for the fiscal year. And so I am moving the approval of the hiring of a professional editor for the document.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Lenke motions,
I'll second.
seconded by, I heard Charlene on that one.
Go ahead.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no further discussion, it will be a yes to approve, no to not approve the hiring of an editor. Missy DeRogers.
Yes.
Missy DeRogers, yes. Mr. Lenke.
Yes.
Mr. Lenke, yes. Mr. Krogel.
Yes.
Mr. Krogel, yes. Ms. Langlois.
Yes.
Langlois, yes. Mr. Santos.
Brian Santos, yes.
Mr. Santos, yes. Mr. Hill.
Yes, Elvin Hill.
Yes. And Joseph Prody Brown votes yes.
It is done.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm
It's
sure.
just, a couple of these items to revisit, Joe, so they'll be quickies.
Yeah, I'm just trying. I'm having the version I'm looking at doesn't have it highlighted where there's so there's no action we need to do on this petition bit, right?
No, it's just, it was a subject of some discussion. Is it a petition? Is it an application? So based both on the existing regulations, the current regulations, if you look at it, it all says petition, and on the idea that we want to reduce nonconformities and spot zoning. Cindy and I did talk about it, and I don't know that she agreed enthusiastically, but she did agree that we will leave it as petition, and an individual applicant isn't really an appropriate use of that function, but a group of petitioners could still entertain, ask the commission to entertain a zoning change according to that described procedure. So you really don't need to do anything. It's just acknowledging Cindy and I spoke and we came to consensus, so it's fine.
Great, thanks. So the next item that requires our action is a revisit of that vote. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we fix this, please?
Yeah, so for those of you who were with us last week, and to give a little context for those who weren't, there was a discussion about whether a shed under 200 square feet would require a permit from the commission. Or
From the ZEO.
From the ZEO, rather. I take full responsibility that the way I worded the question may have been confusing. So before we call the vote, because we would like to re-vote on this just to make sure that
Can I make a comment here?
go ahead, Cindy.
One of the issues that you have to realize that if you don't require a zoning permit on the shed, then the assessor's office will not know that that shed is built, except when they go and do reval. So when I give a zoning permit, I forward a copy up to the assessor's office so that they can be taxed on that shed. The second part of that is, and I don't think I emphasized it last week, is the issue of sheds in the two lake districts. It's bad enough that people do put up sheds without contacting us, and then when their neighbor gets mad. And I've had a couple of instances where they've had to come in for a permit. So what you conceivably could see happen down in the lake area, that they're going to build one shed under 200 square feet, then they've got a little bit more room, they're going to build another one under 200 square feet, on, and so there's no control over in the lake area for sheds. Those are my two comments.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. So, part of the discussion last week was that under 200 feet, the shed does not require a building permit. And so there's this area between 140 and 200 where someone building a shed would require a zoning permit from the ZEO, but not a building permit, and that's state statute. And so the question before us is whether a shed between 140 and 200 square
No,
feet.
just a shed under 200 square feet. Just a shed under 200 square feet.
I'm sorry.
200 or under.
Correct. Any shed under 200 feet, thank you for that correction, should require a permit from the zoning enforcement officer. Are there any questions or comments the commission would like to take at this time?
Just for clarity, the zoning laws still remain, right? Regardless if it's yes or no, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so the way it was going to be worded, with the assumption that the permit would not be required. In other words, assuming it was still an exemption, the way it was going to be worded is that item B is sheds under 200 square feet do not require a zoning permit, but the setbacks must still be observed. So that's how the regulatory language would establish that there is a standard that has to be met. And if somebody complains that, here's your 5-foot setback, but you're 3 feet from my property line, then the ZEO is authorized to take administrative action there.
And in the beginning of your, at some point in the regulations, you do state where the ZEO, after investigation, can order a building to be taken down. So.
Yeah, good luck.
And I see Alvin shaking his head, and it's like, okay, good luck with that.
So
one.
that's why we're voting, guys. And the only reason we're re-voting it is because last week it was obvious, listening both to the vote as it happened and then in the recording, that some people voted for one thing and thought they were voting for the other. It was a hot mess, and it was because it was a yes means no situation. So change the voting language to permit required or no permit required. Make it absolutely clear.
May I speak, Joe?
Yeah, Mr. Hell, yeah.
Let's keep it simple. Structure 200 feet or less requires a zoning permit and not a building permit.
Right.
But you would, so in that case, you would vote for permit required.
No, somebody says.
Okay. Any other?
Otherwise, it's good.
Sorry, go ahead, Alvin.
Otherwise, it's going to create a mess for any zoning officer. I mean, once there's a complaint, I mean, that could drag out for years. Let's have a zoning permit for any structure under 200 square feet.
But not a building permit.
It doesn't require a building permit
Correct.
in building code.
Right, that's not our call. All right, yeah, so, part of the discussion last week was that including the regulatory language would offer the CEO the tools necessary to to enforce or take action. Any other questions or comments before the vote?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lanky.
do we have to make a motion to eliminate what we voted in last week?
I'm sorry, so what we would do is, I would move a vote with the language either permit required or no permit required, as opposed to the way I clumsily worded it last week.
Nobody's perfect.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, but I think we should include Alvin's point about a zoning permit because of the setback. Right, Alvin?
Well, then you would vote yes, permit required.
No, I would vote no
Required,
permit required. That's how I'd vote. But a zoning permit, yeah.
Okay, you're gonna vote in a second. What you are voting on is whether or not we are going to require a zoning permit for a shed or other building or structure under 200 square feet. If you want a zoning permit required, you're going to say permit required. If you do not want a permit required, but are satisfied with the language that includes the regulation about the setback requirements, then you will say no permit required. Just absolute clarity. Cindy has made her points. Alvin has made his points. We did do this last week and it should be resolved, but it was too confusing in the way it was worded, and it was obvious that not everybody voted for what they thought they did.
Can I say one more
Uh,
thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
John Linky brought up a suggestion that you need to rescind that vote from last week. Is that?
Oh, is
something
that what John was saying?
Yes. Because you change it, you want to change it from what was said, right? Way it was voted.
Yes.
So you need a motion to do that.
Yeah,
and then
so
you need
I move that we waive the vote from the June 2nd meeting due to unclarity.
I second it. What?
Motion made by the chair, seconded by Mr. Krogel. It will be a yes to waive last week's vote, a no to let that vote stand. Ms. DeRogers.
Yes.
Missy DeRogers, yes. John Lanky.
Yes.
Mr. Krogel.
Yes.
Ms. Langlois.
Yes.
Mr. Santos.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes,
Mr. Werge.
Yes.
Joseph Purdy Brown, yes. All right. I move to a vote for either no zoning permit required for structures under 200 feet or permit required for structures under, zoning permit required for structures under 200 feet.
Joe?
Yeah.
That sounds still confusing. What did Tara
Zoning
say?
permit required or zoning permit not required. Mr. Hill, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, not a question. 200 feet or less. Don't say, it should be stated 200 feet or less,
Okay. Thank you.
not up to 200 feet or less. It's less confusing.
Okay, thank you. So I will amend my motion zoning permit required for structures 200 square feet or less, or no zoning permit required for structures 200 square feet or less.
Don't you just need the first part? The regulations will.
Guys, let's not litigate this for 20 minutes. Permit required or permit not required. Use that language. That's your vote.
Wow.
Motion has been made.
I'll second
But
that.
what are
motion.
they saying yes or no to? I don't get it. You're putting two choices in there. You
Yeah,
give
that's
them
right.
one choice.
That's exactly the point, Cindy. We're not going to make it a yes or a no vote because that was the confusion last week. So the language of the vote will be either zoning permit required or no zoning permit required.
Thank
I
you.
have a question.
Mr. Word.
Word here. I thought we were talking about a building permit.
No, we
No,
cannot
no,
control. We cannot control a building permit. That is not within our jurisdiction. The question is, right, so no building permit is required for buildings, for structures of 200 square feet or less. That is state statute.
Okay, good.
Our question is, do we want to have them apply for a zoning permit even though they don't need a building permit?
Okay, thank you.
You're
You're
welcome.
correct. Mr. Chairman, it all comes down to the setback. So anything under 200 feet, what we're trying to establish. So if we have a 5-foot setback, yeah, you should have a zoning permit to, for whatever structure, because if, like you said, somebody puts it up and it's 3 feet from the line, you got the neighbor, he's gonna be jumping up and down like orangutan. So, yeah, I think what you're trying to say there is pretty correct.
Great. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the possible votes are either permit required or no permit required. Ms. DeRosiers,
Permit required, Missy DeRosiers.
Mr. Lenke,
Permit required, John B. Linky.
Mr. Krogel,
Permit required.
Ms. Langlois,
Permit required.
Mr. Santos,
No permit required.
Mr. Hill,
Permit required, Alvin Hill.
Mr. Wurge,
No permit required.
Joseph Perotti Brown, no permit required. So that is 5-3 permit required.
Okay, that is clear. And so it shall be.
Thank you. Our next point of discussion is there was a conversation last week about the commission may request information related to rock outcropping, slopes, soil types, etc. And so the question is, should we leave that language in the drafts as written or not? The question arose, how do we verify, how would we determine those issues? Tira points out that there are generally
There's databases.
yeah, I'm sorry, pretty good databases that are available, widely available. And in the discussion guide, she recommends keeping that language in, but it was something that we discussed and I think had planned to come back to today. So here we are.
Yeah, if I can, in being in construction,
Mr. Santos, yep.
being in construction, I would like to see general information about soil types and classifications. And there are many different types of websites that collect that data. I know in the construction operations that I'm running, the civil engineer provides that data regardless to whomever they're working for. So I would like to see some sort of this general data collected and shared with our group so we understand the lay of the land.
And again, to be clear here, all of these items are discretionary
Correct.
for the commission in the case of a special permit. This article and section is where we left off. And in the next one, we'll be speaking with Attorney Heller, who is on the line, and I did unmute him. because it gets into this series of related questions. So that, since that was right where we left off, it was a little loosey-goosey
Yeah.
what was actually decided.
Are we discussing 3C3?
Yes.
That is correct.
Thank
3C3B.
you. What is Wetlands and Watercourses doing in the Planning and Zoning Board? That's not our purview. Item 3 under 3C3.
Yep. That's right where we are. So the location of rock outcrop.
What?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just reading the section that you're talking about. The location of rock outcropping, slopes in excess of 25%, soil types delineated by a qualified soil scientist, forested areas on the lot, wetlands and water courses.
No, that's not our purview. That's wetlands purview.
But
It doesn't belong in planning and zoning.
planning and zoning has to consider a report from the Wetlands Commission,
Correct. A
however.
report from
So
them,
it
but
is
we,
under your jurisdiction to some degree.
to some degree.
I mean, it's
not
asking
our
for the
regulation.
location. So if you don't see the location of it on the site plan and you get wouldn't you rather have that information to view the wetlands report based on?
Wetlands should have reviewed it and approved or denied.
Yeah, but I think that this type of stuff comes up every time there's let's just say mining operation or some other dwelling that's being built. I think this group needs to know the general topography, the lay of the land. I completely agree, Bob, that wetlands is reviewing it, but I think we should also have some data in order to educate ourselves about what's going on there, and have this general line item asking for some data so we have it as well.
Okay, but we should have gotten.
And again, it's
wetlands.
discretionary.
That's the
Yeah.
point I was just going to make, Tira. As it is
Discretion.
discretionary, right? It simply allows us to request this when we feel like it, when we think it's appropriate, rather. I don't see any harm in keeping the language in. John, I'm sorry, Bob, to your point, I understand that we're getting a report from the wetlands office.
Correct.
But is there any harm in keeping it in, is my question. I would answer no.
Can I, this is Carolyn, can I interject here?
Of course.
It seems to me that if there are wetlands or watercourses or both on a property, the application is going to show it regardless. It will have to go through wetlands, but it will be shown on the application. So if it's, it's almost like a requirement up front, not even discretionary.
Absolutely.
Because if it wasn't on the site plan, you would be wondering why they're not making use of that portion of the property, or you might be directing them to make use of it. So it's already on the site plan. I don't see that as an issue at all.
So are you saying that you think it's redundant and should be struck, or that it's just
Well, no, I'm
harmless
not
that
saying,
it's there?
I'm not saying it should be struck, but it seems to me that it's never been an issue. You've always had it showing on a site plan to begin with, because that's part of the whole process.
So I guess the follow-up question to that is stating, the fact that it may be the convention notwithstanding, stating it sets the expectation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's the general point we're trying to make here.
But it should be, but should it be in the required section as opposed to a discretionary section? Is that?
I'm looking back at application requirements right now.
So,
It is in somewhere. I know it is. I'm trying to read quickly, of course. The location of all water courses and inland wetlands is item number 13 for zoning permit with site plan review.
Yeah.
So that is already addressed.
Okay.
So, it might be less confusing than to strike the wetlands and water courses language from this discretionary bit because it's a requirement. It doesn't impact.
Yeah, I would agree with
I
that.
think so.
Okay, fair.
But
I would
aside
agree
from,
with that.
I would keep the rock outcroppings and the soil types and
I'm good with that, Joe, too.
That's part of zoning though.
yeah. Is there any objection to that from the commission?
Nope.
So we will move on and we are still on page 16, Article 3C, Section 3. This is B6, so 3 sections down. Analyses of wildlife habit. I think that's supposed to be oh no, I'm sorry, it could be habits. Is it habitats?
No,
Habitats. It's probably habitats.
Yeah.
It probably should have been habitats. Whatever.
Analyses of wildlife habitats on or near the site, including any rare or endangered species and the impact of the proposed use on such habitats. We had received correspondence from Attorney Heller. Does anyone have any questions for Attorney Heller about this, about what he shared with us at this time?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Ryan?
So, Mr. Heller, I forgive me, I didn't read every word of your letter, so I apologize for that. But just a 30,000-foot view, it sounded like there was a particular issue because you were near an endangered species area. Is that kind of the crux of the whole thing?
For the record, Harry Heller, an attorney with an office at 736 Route 32 in Uncasville, and I represent Rawson Materials. That was the issue that started the debate because the state of Connecticut maintains the Natural Diversity Database, which is a repository of all reported incidences of endangered species, threatened species, and species of special concern. So the issue that was raised was whether or not those are legitimate items to be considered for regulation under the zoning power of a municipality. And what we did was we looked at the statute that creates zoning. It's chapter 124 of the general statutes. Your powers did not exist at common law. Your powers were granted to you by the legislature, which enacted zoning enabling legislation, which allowed municipalities to enact zoning regulations. And section 8-2 of the statutes delineates in fairly significant detail the matters that can be regulated by a municipal zoning commission. And the case law is quite clear that you only have the power to regulate the powers that are granted to you under section 8-2 of the statutes. And that statute does not give a municipal zoning authority to regulate or consider either habitat issues or endangered, threatened, or species of special concern. So that was the thrust of my opinion.
Yep.
Okay. And of course, an opinion is a legal document. Ultimately, it's my opinion. It's based on my research of the law and the application of my knowledge as someone who practices in this area, both to the particular facts and the law as I've researched it.
Okay. Joe, if I can, a little bit more.
Mr. Santos, yeah.
So I'm not going to speak about the legalities of whether or not the zoning commission has the power to, control yes or no votes on when it comes to endangered species. But the thing that I do want this group to think about is people come in, the public come in, and they always ask about, did we do our research on endangered species? So I surely want to have something in our document, and maybe it's just like the soil types that we just talked about, because there's all kinds of websites out there. What is it? It's called, hold on one second. I got it on my other screen here. Sorry, everybody. So
while Brian's looking, when he's done, I just want to share what what our attorney came back with.
Yeah, I was going to jump in with that too, Tira. Yeah, go
All
ahead, Ryan.
Okay.
So the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection in Connecticut Gov here, they have, mapping, GIS mapping of where endangered species live. Okay, and it's a very general map. It's updated. I don't know how often, but the one that I'm looking at was 2019. I would like, when someone comes in, we'll stick with the gravel mining operation. When they submit an application, I would like to see at least that map telling me where the endangered species live or are, so we can consider it. I'm not saying that's going to vote yes or no, but I would at least like to have the information available from the applicant. And I'm assuming that Marla or someone else in our town is reviewing that more specifically. So that's a question for the group. But as far as zoning goes, I'm not saying it's going to be weighing yes or no, but I would like to know the data similar to the soil type data that we just kind of outlined.
If I may, again, for the record, Harry Heller, there's an inherent difference in the soil types, slopes in excess of 25%, rock outcroppings. Those are matters of constructability that deal with erosion and sediment control that you specifically have power under the enabling legislation to consider. When you get into habitat and endangered species, you're on a slippery slope. Once you request the information, even having that information under consideration, in my opinion, leaves the commission open to an appeal that information may have been considered in your deliberations and your vote.
So, Joe, if I can, do you want to say what our attorney said? I feel like I'm double dipping on stuff here.
Tira, do you want to share Attorney Roberts?
Yeah, I've got it right in front of me. So this is, because of course I sent Attorney Heller's letter over to him for consideration. And explained to him the back and forth, and Attorney Heller, by the way, was very open, and we had a little back and forth. He acknowledges that there is not settled case law confirming his opinion. He did have the concurring opinion from, I think it was an attorney for the town of Brooklyn. So, and having said that, as I pointed out to Rich when I made the inquiry, I don't doubt Attorney Heller's sincerity or the sort of the cogent logic of his argument, but he is representing a specific interest for a specific client. So, Attorney Roberts is representing our interest in looking at it. So this is his response to me. Regarding the issue raised by Attorney Heller, he is correct that there is no definitive case law on that particular subject. While there is no specific statutory basis for the PZC to regulate a special permit use based solely on the potential impacts on endangered or threatened wildlife habitat, I do think that it is legitimate information for the PZC to request in conjunction with all of the other information listed so that it can evaluate the proposed project as necessary in light of the scale, scope of significance of any potential impacts. He is correct that if the PZC wishes to impose conditions or restrictions, those conditions or restrictions must relate back to something that the Commission does affirmatively have jurisdiction over. Now that, that leaves a little gray area, I think, but the way I would, what I think that suggests is, and let's move away from picking on gravelers all the time. Let's pick on a multifamily development. Let's pick on a housing development. If they are showing on their site plan an area where Caroline flags that, I think I've seen this on the database that there may be a threatened species out there. We've already given the commission has already claimed the right to set larger buffer areas. So that is using information say, no, you cannot do this, but out of sensitivity for this potential threatened species. I mean, to me, that seems like a legitimate use of the information within the commission's specific purview. So, and again, I would concur that a detailed analysis is both onerous and in many cases probably impossible. I mean, who's got that expertise? But to have a general outline from a publicly available database maintained by a state or federal government for the express purpose of keeping the Endangered Species Act, viable and active, I think that is a reasonable assertion to make.
I disagree. I go with Attorney Haller. It is none of our business. If we would like to know, if we request from the Conservation Commission their input about habitat, about endangered species, that's fine. But I don't think habitat, endangered species, or none of that belong in zoning regulations.
Okay, so I hear you, Bob, but if we don't include the discretionary language that gives you the ability to ask for the information, whether that be from the applicant or from the Conservation Commission, it is not establishing that it could be a priority, which I think is the purpose of having it here. It's a discretionary item. If it's just a report of publicly available information from the applicant, I would say that is not an onerous request, and whether you choose to use the information otherwise is, up to you, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm viewing this item as a flag for us. And it's something that people were always asking about, and we should be attentive to those matters, to go ask the Conservation Commission and see what the detailed analysis is. There's plenty, like I just said, there's a public website that kind of gives you a general guideline of where these endangered species live. And, it just comes up in every single meeting. I think we should just be prepared to say, yeah, it's a red flag for us, and we do our analysis on it. That's all. I agree with our attorney and what Tira outlined.
Again, for the record, Harry Heller, it's not a question of whether it's an onerous task for the applicant or not. That's not the issue as I see it. The issue is that this, again, in my opinion, based on my understanding of the law, is not an issue that can be considered by the Zoning Commission in its decision-making process in acting on an application. There are other regulations on larger projects. If a project disturbs over 5 acres, a state stormwater registration is required with DEEP. As part of that registration process, or if it's in a larger project, it may even require a individual permit. As part of that process, those things are evaluated. But as I read the enabling legislation, it's simply outside the scope of consideration of a zoning commission. It's not part of your power.
Well,
Joe, do you see Caroline's got her?
No, I was actually just
I
going
have
to
a hand up.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
May I?
Yeah, of course.
I kind of approached this from a slightly different angle. My concern centered around, legal authority and to regulate based on that information, for planning and zoning to regulate. So the Connecticut General Statutes, Chapter 495, Endangered Species, authorizes the state to implement protections for endangered species, threatened, special concern, and their habitat. The state has authority to list the species, acquire essential habitat, review all state agency projects, as well as any projects that are funded with state funds in order to protect species and habitat. The legislation does not extend such authority to the municipalities. So my question was, does the Planning and Zoning Commission have the right to request the information? And that has been addressed by Attorney Roberts. This is your decision. While
Agreed.
495, Chapter 495 doesn't give municipalities authority to directly protect endangered species and habitats, I don't think that your commission is powerless to do anything for the benefits of wildlife and habitat. I think that when you're drafting your zoning and subdivision regulations, you can further those interests of such protections by designing to preserve and conserve wildlife corridors and linkages connecting undeveloped land to minimize the fragmentation of habitat. So one of the things that you are doing is to provide for no more than one flag lot in rural residential district. By the way, Tira, that happens to be like a subsection under conservation subdivisions, but I don't think it should be
That's
there.
where we moved it. You think we should move it again?
It shouldn't be part of a conservation subdivision because a conservation subdivision inherently restricts development to cluster the residences and to preserve, you know, maybe up to half of the property for wildlife and for passive recreation. So it should be in general every place else and in traditional subdivisions, I think. And the other thing, the third thing that you can do in your regulations is make good use of open space set-asides and fees in lieu of open space. This would be concerning subdivisions. By having the Conservation Commission review subdivision applications and make recommendations that will further conservation and connectivity of the wildlife habitat and corridors. So the Conservation Commission is always open for a review. It doesn't have to be just for a subdivision application. And we have the database that Brian just spoke about on the natural diversity database. That, by the way, is updated every 6 months, although many of the towns might not see any change over a long period of time. But they do update that every 6 months. And I run an independent desktop GIS program, so I can go through all of the natural resource layers that we have and report back to you. I go through that, I prepare it for the commission reviews everything and decides what recommendations, et cetera, we're going to make. But I think that it's been underutilized by our reviews have been underutilized by planning and zoning for a number of years now.
I agree.
And there was a time when the Wetlands Commission utilized our reviews very frequently, and whenever we do a review for wetlands, we always forward a copy to planning and zoning. Now, Marla is very knowledgeable and hasn't felt the need for our reviews except for a couple times. So you guys can certainly request it on your own. You don't have to wait for wetlands to request it. So we're here to help.
Yep, that's good.
So based on that commentary, Carolyn, are you saying that you think that this is an unnecessary item, a troublesome item, or more along the lines of what we see from Attorney Roberts, which is, you know, as a discretionary request for information,
I'm not a legal person, but I think if Attorney Roberts feels comfortable with advising you that you can ask for that information, we'll see where it goes. Obviously, there's no case law in which someone has tried to,
nobody's won or lost on this yet.
Yeah, no one has challenged the ability of the commission to ask for that information. So we don't know what the answer to that is.
But may I say
so I'm guessing, you know, maybe that's a little bit of a risk, and maybe it's an inconsequential risk to ask for the information. But you can certainly get that kind of information from us if you ask for a review. So perhaps you might want to state it in your regulations that the Planning and Zoning Commission can request input from the Conservation Commission. I don't know. You'll have to think on exactly how you would like to include that. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it's important.
Thank you, Carolyn. Mr. Werge?
Well, I was just going to say, I agree, of course. I might. I mean, I agree with everything you said, but for me, it comes down to the bottom line of habitat, whatever. So we know, let's say we know there's some endangered species in an application for a special permit. Okay, we know that, but there's nothing we can do about it. We don't have the power as a planning and zoning board to act on anything. It's nice, as Mr. Santos said, it's nice to know about it, but we can't do anything about it. So what's the point?
But I would interject, you can request. You
Yeah,
can,
request.
you can make a request. You can ask someone to cooperatively move something. I mean, I'm big on win-win situations. So it's not that you want to take something away, but you want to try to work it so that both objectives can be met.
Is that what
So
you're?
Joe, can I suggest a vote here then?
Yeah.
Which would be to strike item B6 entirely, or to retain it amended so that it doesn't ask for analyses of wildlife habitats, just is essentially information from the database, and we can work on the actual phrasing of that if it passes. I'm not that concerned about that, but I think we all agree that the analyses are outside the boundaries. It's informational, or it's no information at all.
Yeah, Brian, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to conclude on that I'm definitely going to vote for keeping it, primarily for a few reasons. Number one, like I opened up with, people come in and ask about this every single time. So we need to have something in there. And I don't want this group thinking that just because there's, there's a possible appeal or judgment against us to strike this out. Appeals happen all the time, okay? It's just a part of the process. I'd rather know the data and be able to talk at an educated level to the public about whether or not there's an endangered species or not, and then take advantage of the other groups such as Carolyn or Marla and get their information from them. So appeal processes happen all the time. So just wanted to conclude on that.
Well, I agree in essence what you're saying, know about it, but there's nothing our board can do about it. If you say, we get all the data and that says, there's an endangered species there on that special permit request.
Okay, so let's expand on that a little bit if we can, just a
Yes,
little
I
longer.
would.
So if there's an endangered species there, does anyone in this group is going to put a vote yes to allow the gravel mining operation to go through? What's the next step after that? What are we going to do? We're going to just let it go?
Well, no, you have to let it go because it's not your purview to deny the permit based on habitat. You don't
I
do
understand,
that.
but who's gonna step up to say there's an endangered species there? What part of the town is doing that?
The state regulates.
Okay.
Carolyn just went through that. The
Okay,
state,
yeah, the state
regulates
does that.
endangered species, not the planning
I
zoning
think-
board.
I think what the language does is something else. I think what the language does is it gives it, because again, as Brian points out, it gives you the information and the knowledge. It gives you the opportunity to negotiate with the developer, whether it be a graveler or a developer of a housing project or whatever, to say, hey, this has been brought to our attention. This is flagged. We want to work with you to make this possible, but as a further condition, because here is this sensitive area of your property, that there be an additional buffer, that the work not be done here, that you amend your plan. And you may still, look, obviously based on Attorney Heller's opinion, it is possible that you would be vulnerable to an appeal at which point you may lose, but then it would be settled and you would have that information to strike it. But you might not lose, and then that would enforce enhance the authority of the regulation. So it's not a zero risk proposition. Certainly you can take out the worst part of that, which is, to ask somebody to do work that's almost certainly outside of their ability or expertise. And as Carolyn and I have discussed further, when you articulate your preference for conservation awareness in planning, that may in fact make a thoughtful developer put that thought into giving the plan to you before it even comes to you. That would be my argument for it. Now, I think you guys should vote on it up or down, one way or the other, whatever you decide, I'm fine with. But that is my opinion as your advisory staff member.
Great, thank you, Tara. I would like to, if there is no further discussion, I would like to call the vote on this issue. Okay, hearing no further discussion, I will move that we vote, and again, this won't be a yes or no vote, we will vote to strike the language, or we will vote to keep the language.
Amend and keep.
Amend and keep, thank you. Amend and keep the language. Okay, so that's the motion. Strike or amend and keep.
Can you read it one more time, just the language, so I make sure I can hear it?
Certainly. The language is...
I've got it, Joe, if you want.
Thanks. Yeah, I just scrolled ahead a little bit. Analyses of wildlife habits on or near the site, including any rare or endangered species, and the impact of the proposed use on such habitats. Okay. So the motion has been made to vote strike or amend and keep. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Santos. Any discussion? Hearing no further discussion, we will begin with a roll call vote. Mr. Werge.
Strike.
Ms. Langlois.
Can you go to the next person?
Mr. Hill.
Alvin Hill, strike.
Mr. Santos.
Brian Santos, keep and amend.
Mr. Krogel.
Keep and amend.
Mr. Lenke.
Keep and amend.
Mr. Rozier.
Missy DeRosa, strike.
Ms. Langlois.
Well, not because I was gonna say keep and amend, just so that we can be aware of what's out there and we do not look and sound stupid when somebody asks us if we knew there was, species in that area.
And so that's an amend and keep vote from Charlene Langlois. Joseph Perotti Brown, amend and keep.
Charlene, is that correct? Because you clipped out there at the end. Is that what you intended?
Amend and keep, yes.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I lost a little bit of track there, but I think that's 5 and 3. Amend and keep.
5 to 3 to keep and amend. Yes.
Thank you.
Guys, I'm gonna have to step out. I'll try to be back.
Okay, thank you. Missy DeRozier stepped out at 6:56 p.m.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lenke.
Mr. Lenke is stepping out too.
Okay, Mr. Lenke.
I'm leaving my I'm gonna use my phone.
Okay, great. Mr. Krogel.
We do still have 6 though, right?
Yes.
Krogel, Perotti, Hill, Santos, Langlois.
Werge.
1, 2, and Werge. There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, so the next item is no commission item required. So the next one, we are on page 16, Article 3C, Section 3. This is additional application information for special permits, and it's Section B8. A list of additional federal, state, or municipal permits or licenses. Yeah, the recommendation here is, I would suggest that we strike this. It ties up into something we discussed earlier in Article 3A, Section 1. Council advice seems to be to strike it. Is that a fair, if quick summary of it, Tira?
Yeah, I mean, it was another one of these jurisdictional issues, but Rich found it more clear that the requirement to have the applicant show the additional permits was not within the jurisdiction of P&Z, and that it wasn't necessarily relevant to the approval of our permits, because if they don't get their other permits and we give them ours, it's not a negative impact on us. They can't go forward because they can't get their other permits. So it's fine to strike that, I think.
Great. Is there anyone on the commission who feels strongly that it should be kept?
Just what article are we under? I just want to read it again, Joe.
Yeah, this is 3C, Section 3.
Article 3?
Article 3C.
3C.
It's on page 16, Brian.
Okay.
It's just still in that list of discretionary items is where we are.
It's B8. It's the last one. It's right near the bottom of page 16.
Okay.
So if anyone has any strong feelings that there's a compelling interest for us to keep that item in.
No.
What's the matter, Alvin? You look pained.
I'm just trying to find where we are, that's all.
Okay, in that case, it seems like the consensus of the commission is that it can be stricken.
Yep.
Stricken from the record.
Okay.
Kabooms.
Then the next item is a similar issue. This is now on page 17. It's towards the bottom half of page 17 in that first Article 3C, Section 5. Now we're down at L. The impact of the proposed use of sensitive wildlife and plant habitats. Right, so this lists that as a criterion for evaluating the special permit, which
I think there's a stronger case to strike it as a criteria.
I was
I'm
just
gonna
thinking
go
the
with
same exact thing, right? It would, I think Bob would quickly point out that it is not in our jurisdiction to make that a criterion for decision. And I think,
Bravo.
thank you, Bob.
See, there's room for compromise here, Bob. There really is.
Yeah.
Golden A ball.
Is there anyone who advocates keeping L in?
I do. No, I'm only kidding. You do that for Bob. Sorry, Bob. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we will strike L and continue on.
So we're going to strike that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Strike it.
Yes, yes.
I just want to be clear.
And then right underneath that is our next item. And we have a lengthy comment about, or not really a lengthy comment, it's proposed language about including historical and archaeological data in the in the opening. Kira points out that this comes from actually the town of Killingworth, and it's in their subdivision regulations, not in their zoning regulations. Kira,
Yeah, I mean, it was obvious to me that the commenter, whose point of view I definitely appreciate, also did not realize that that was not for every single permit. And when you look at the online document, it's not crystal clear in what part of the document this goes. So I was reading it going, this is crazy. How can they possibly be asking this for every permit? So I called their CEO, and she confirmed that this is a set of conditions that exists only in their subdivision regulations. Now, you know, this is the verbatim language, but we're, you know, these are all related topics, right? What is it that you guys want to consider because they are priorities for you in the issuance of a special permit? I think that there is less controversy around identifying archaeological sites, historical sites, yada, yada, than there is around species, at least as I, you know, have gleaned it reading from, you know, through the statutes and other town zoning. I think this language is excessive, particularly in this context, but, you know, what is the level that you want to consider historical landmarks, artifacts, the potential for items of archaeological significance? I would suggest it certainly shouldn't be at any level lower than a special permit. The conversation I had with the CEO is that, you know, this was for large tracts. This isn't for somebody pulling a house permit. This isn't for somebody, you know, doing something in sort of a conventional residential lot. It's for large development tracts that they require this. I'll point out that during that public engagement exercise that we did last June, the three things that were identified by the most people who participated in that were, you know, trash and litter management, community identity, and historical landmarks. Those three things, above all that 104 topics that were considered in that sort of planning game, 91% of the people who participated that night identified that as very important to them. So it's worth considering that there is some indication that the historical heritage of the town of Thompson is significant to a significant portion of its residents. And as that has been identified as a priority, what does the commission want to do to acknowledge or accommodate for that? I think that's the fair synopsis.
Kira, correct me if I'm wrong. The location of historical sites is a requirement on a site plan for a special permit?
I'm going to look at you mean in the current regs?
No, as drafted.
As in this draft?
Proposed, yeah.
I have so many pieces of paper in front of me here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Just bear with me while I turn back a couple of pages.
Like while Tira's doing that,
yeah,
I want to make sure that I'm reading the right stuff here as well. The one that I'm reading, it says, and it opens up with, the commission may place on a special permit conditions it may reasonably deem necessary to assure that any proposed building structure. So the word may is included there. So we may
That's right. This stuff is all discretionary.
Yeah. So it's a discretionary thing if we ask for, you know, whether there's natural or historic resources in the area, right? So it's not a requirement.
Who would we ask that of?
An applicant.
Yeah, we would ask that of the applicant. I would agree.
Applicant themselves?
So here's the question.
Yeah,
Does this imply that you have to have regulations that control those items?
That is an interesting question, Carolyn, and I do not have a response.
Well, I didn't think you would, right off the top, but I think that's a whole other subject. I mean, if you were to adopt any kind of archaeological regulations or historic, that's a big study.
Yeah,
To find, first to find where would the authority come from, and then, how would you implement it, and, what kind of regulations are going to work. So this is, I think,
Yeah, I mean, as it's currently drafted on page 17 under 3C, section 5, criteria for evaluation of special permits, the item that is closest in that list just says, I just had it, where'd it go? The existence and protection of important natural and historic resources. Now, I will say that we all kind of had consensus on that language as we were going through it, but that is really open-ended, and Carolyn does bring up a valid point. However, it is worth reiterating that the preservation of historic value is a community priority. So even if we don't include that here in this, specifically as a condition of a special permit, what do we posit to show that the priorities of the community are mirrored in the land use regulations?
Tira, I'm looking too at on page 12, the zoning permit with site plan review by commission requirements. So it's all of the above from Article 3A, Section 4, right? There is an item, the location, if known, of any historic, archaeological, or environmentally significant areas. That is a requirement.
Oh, I see it now. I missed it earlier. Okay, yeah, I do see it.
So that's a requirement we've put on them for the site plan for a special permit.
I mean, if you think that that is sufficient, I am fine with that. I obviously this is where we're discussing the public comment, and that was a very thoughtful one that was supplied. If you guys think that's sufficient, I'm, like I say, no big deal, and we don't need any further action on it.
And so it turns to you, members of the commission. So I mean, yeah. So is that enough to require it on a site plan that accompanies a special permit application?
I'm okay with that, speaking for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need a voice vote here because it's already in there, and I don't think it's super controversial. I mean, if anybody's got super strong opinions one way or the other, I think this is just the time to air that.
I guess, should we, to that section, that subsection K that you were just reading, Tira, should we add archaeological, as historical and archaeological have been paired together earlier in the regulations?
That's an easy add.
Yeah.
Is there any strong objection to keeping the original language as it is and then adding that archaeological? Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay. I don't hear any strong objection, so we can move on, I think. So the next one, the next item will require a little bit of discussion. The comment was pretty robust, and Tira's response to it is suitably robust in response. But this comes down to the idea of, again, what conditions for special permits we think are appropriate.
Joe, are you looking at 17, page 17, 3C, section 6?
Yes.
Yeah, conditions for special permit, section A. Yep. Correct. So, the commenter has requested completed conservation review checklist, natural resource assessment map, traffic study must be prepared by a professional traffic engineer, species, archaeological significance, and calls on the commission to clearly define harmony in our regulations.
That last is moot, Joe, because that's in relation to something in the existing regulations that was purposefully removed into this draft anyway.
Because of its
for precisely the reasons that she cites, because it was subjective garbage.
Yeah.
So that's already gone.
Great. Oh yeah, I see that in your comments. Sorry, I missed that.
That's okay. I mean, everybody knows what the origin of this is, right? This is from the group that's advocating against any gravel mining at all. These are their original comments. They were invited to tune in tonight to, provide any updated opinions, comments. They opted rather strenuously not to participate any further in our process, but out of fairness, I did include these here. So I think most of these things are either some form of moot or are addressed sort of factually. The relationship between the Conservation Commission and P&Z is clearly one where conservation advises P&Z. They can't dictate. And I think that that's been a source of some of your objections to some of their language all along, and I would concur with that. The point where I think there remains some wiggle room is that inclusion of that conservation checklist in a more prominent way. So we've already established that the thing does exist, but the way in which it gets to you may not be robust enough, even if it is only in an advisory fashion. So, I mean, I would suggest there's no harm in including that in an appendix. It illustrates for an applicant that this is information that might be requested of you or that is being reviewed when you submit an application by the Conservation Commission, and they will advise the commission accordingly. I think there's no harm in including it. Carolyn, what's your feeling on that?
Well, I don't really like the terminology checklist. We do a review. I mean, some people could look at the results of the review and call it a checklist, but we call it a conservation review. So that's all.
So just a language thing, but the inclusion of some kind of set of guidelines, a format that you could expect your application, special permit application, to come under scrutiny for, whether you call it a checklist or not.
Okay, so in other words, are you going to make this compulsory? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm suggesting that like some of the other things that are in the appendices, like the design guidelines, which with the exception of Thompson Common can only be advisory, they can't be mandatory. It's like that email thread that you and I had earlier in the week. If you are stating a preference for a robust conservation review, if you're saying that it's important to you up front in the document, then that is more likely to get you a favorable application up front where the stuff's being identified, where somebody's doing their due diligence, not because we're coming to them after the fact and asking them to do extra work, but because if they're reading the documents diligently, they can see what we're interested in and they can act accordingly. So that's my feeling on that.
Yeah, I don't see any harm, and I think it could be beneficial to add it as an appendix. The conservation review guidelines.
Well,
Again, for the record, Harry Heller.
Hi, Harry.
Hi. I really can't comment on this because I haven't seen the checklist and I don't know what type of information may be requested. And, you know, again, hearkening back to my prior presentation, some of it may be legitimate, it may be within the scope of zoning, some may not, and it becomes an issue of how you utilize that information in your decision-making process on the application.
Right.
And I think in that regard, Attorney Roberts and myself were in agreement that that information is not a legitimate scope of information to be utilized as part of the decision-making process.
Right, correct. I agree.
I think what happens is the citizens are not really aware of what our roles are. They think we have to know everything, see everything, look at the animals, the trees, the dirt, the rocks, and then when we make a decision, they think that we're being pig-headed and we just say, nope, it passes. But it passes for a whole bunch of other reasons way before planning and zoning. It doesn't get it. If it passes everything else, it gets to us. And basically, as long as everything's in a line and they've done everything right and it's gone through wetlands and, you know, historical society and animal society and all that, then we have no choice but to. And I think when the buck stops with planning and zoning, they get irritated thinking we've just passed it without even looking at anything. And so I feel like we do the best that we can. I feel like inlands and wetlands helps us and conservation helps us and maps help us. And we have enough commissions and members that we can ask questions to. And then we make a decision based on the information that we've gotten. And I feel bad that they don't take everything into consideration, that we're not just sitting there being pig-headed saying, yep, let it go. Yep, pass it. Yep, yep. They just don't get it.
So Charlene, do you think the inclusion of the review as an appendix in the regulations would help help them understand the information we're getting?
Yeah, and maybe like where it comes from, like when we're, you know, it's not all just planning and zoning. It doesn't end with us. You know, it comes to it does end with us, but it's not because we have the final say. Everyone else has put their input and information, and it just ends up in our hands. So it might help them to see that, you know, the Historical Society has looked at it, Inlands and Wetlands has looked at it, Conservation has looked at it, maybe put in parentheses what each group has done or needs to look at, and then it'll be a full group of people making a decision and not just planning and zoning at the end.
As it should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agree.
Does anyone on the commission have a strong opposition to adding this as a appendix?
Nope. Add it.
All right. So Carolyn, maybe you and I can work on what you want that to look like that would represent the work that the Conservation Commission is actually doing on behalf of that when you get an application.
What I can do is I can show you what we've done in the past.
Perfect.
And then you can take what you want, you know, use what you feel is going to fit the bill. All right.
I like that.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, friends, we get to jump ahead to page 20. And we're right at the top of page 20 in the proposed draft. It's Article 3C, Section 8, rendering the decision. So Cindy, we're gonna call you into this discussion, right? To make sure we understand the flow of this and how it works best and how we both best want it to work. Right?
I don't know what you want to change about that. I don't know if a town clerk, why would you get the town clerk involved in processing a permit? I don't get it. So.
Well, this is another one of those cases where we just didn't look at this that closely because we made some assumptions when we got the first copy of this draft back that the administrative process was fundamentally correct. So if you're identifying a deficit, is this going to be, let me ask you, Cindy, is this going to be a simple thing like the meeting that we had yesterday with you and me and Donna, where you and I can sit down and say, this is how this actually should be phrased, and the
Well, yeah,
commission
'cause
doesn't
that's
really.
what I wrote. That's how, remove the information about the, obviously the legal notices have to go out, but remove all the information about the town clerk and add what I put in there. This is how it's done.
Okay,
right now.
yeah, you and I will make sure that's correct tomorrow or Friday or whenever you're in the office. Okay, you guys don't need to do anything on this. This is for me and Cindy.
Excellent. And we are now jumping ahead to page 22. We are flying.
Oh yeah, we are flying, but this stuff gets really hairy for a little while.
Yeah.
Commissioners, I'm going to drop off. I have no dog in the fight on your zoning districts.
You don't want to stay for the fun?
Oh, come on.
When you get to your sections at a future meeting on the gravel regulations, I will participate in that. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your time, Attorney Hall.
Thank you, Attorney Haler.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Sign off as well.
Night.
Thank you, guys.
Later, Madeline.
Good night, Madeline. Okay, so who we do have, and I'm actually going to go a little bit out of order and just let him, because he's been diligently listening to this since the beginning. I'm unmuting our brand new assessor. I'm trying to unmute him. There we go. Paul Hopkins, whose first work for the town of Thompson has been addressing some of these pesky issues that arose out of the proposal to bang it all down to 1 acre minimum zoning in the rural residential. As I'm sure you have all seen, we've had some very emotional
Where are you at,
responses to
Tara?
this.
What
22 on the zoning districts. Just in the description of zoning districts, there's a lot of stuff that comes up here.
So why are we jumping to that? Because you have discussion guide number 2.
We're in discussion guide number 2.
Right, but you have table of contents and you have other stuff in there, don't you?
We've already been through all that. That's what we're going in
okay.
order in that discussion guide.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry because I went from the old one. Okay. So what page are you on now?
Well, the pages in the discussion guide aren't numbered, but it's page 22 of the draft where it describes the zoning districts.
I don't have the job.
We've got a lot of comments to cover here, but let's start with the one concerning the assessor.
Okay, I got it.
Paul, did you mute yourself again? I didn't do that.
Yes, I did. Sorry.
Yeah, so as I'm sure you guys all read in the outgoing assessor's letter, she made some assertions about the administrative burden on the assessor's office and made at least some implications that there would be negative consequences for taxpayers in this proposed combining of those two into one residential district. So I'm going to let Paul take it from there.
So as part, thank you for allowing me a few minutes to just interject. I do appreciate it. So there's the true impact is insignificant. So how assessing really operates is we only can change values during an assessment year. So what this means is even if you change the zoning on any of these parcels, we'll change what zoning reflects on our database. But for the actual valuation of how we handle the value of the parcels, it wouldn't actually go into effect until our next revaluation, which is October 1st, 2024. And even then, I gave a couple of examples of what the impact is to an assessment that you change where you go from an 80,000 square foot required lot size down to a 40,000 square foot lot size. And what happens is because you're shrinking the overall requirement for building lots. So a building lot is whatever the zone size is. So whether it's 80,000 square feet or 40,000 square feet, that's where your majority of value is going to be attributed to. Anything above that zoned lot size is going to be valued at some excess value. Your building lot in Thompson right now, we're right around, say, on average, about $50,000 for whatever that zoned building lot size is. Anything above that is valued at $1,900 an acre. So when you're going from 80,000 square feet with an attributed value of around $50,000 and you remove half of that to go down to 40,000 square feet, that $40,000 square feet comes out of that larger calculation and moves down to a calculation that's dealing with $1,900 per lot unit. So it's a significantly smaller number that you're impacting. The true impact, as you've seen, is really only a few $1,000s in difference to the land attributed to those changed parcels. And we only really have to change the, I believe it was RA80 zone down to whatever the new zone size is, 40,000 square feet or whatnot. So it's not a significant impact to our staff, and simply in that we can do an export of all our fields that have an RA80. And with our vision system, we can do a direct import in. So we can export that field out to Excel, change them all to whatever the new zone is, and then we can input the field back into the system. So really, it's not an arduous task to handle.
So how long would that take, Paul, to do that? Like, say 2 days after these regs come through, and I need to go upstairs and get a property card. Are you going to have the new zone on that property card?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really
2 days after the regs are you're going to have it.
It is.
I don't have that much belief in technology. Sorry.
Technology, Cindy. Technology.
Yeah. I don't have that much belief in the competence of it. So the other question I have to ask you said there's only 2 major zones that are going to change. That's not true because we're changing the R20. You're adding. I don't have them in front of me. So
yeah, Cindy's right. There is an implication in the R20 as well, but this was the big one, so we're going to deal with this one first.
So that was my spiel on the 80 to 40.
Okay, I gotta excuse myself.
And Paul ran some sample properties for me today. So for those residents in R80 who currently have 2-acre minimum zoning, whose lot size would not change, right? It would just be the way that their tax assessment is calculated. They have a slight tax savings.
Correct.
As he showed it to me.
Correct. That tax savings wouldn't go into effect until 2024. So that's saying that and that's taking the assumption that the market stays exactly the same as it is now. There's no difference. And that in the next revaluation cycle, those numbers bear out to be the same as they are during this last revaluation.
Can somebody
So the other thing was, go ahead, Brian.
I just wanted to know, because I can't remember the 1 acre that we came up with or talking about. Where is there history to that? Where did we?
Sort of.
Yeah, I can't remember.
So what we had additionally proposed was no minimum lot size other than that which would satisfy the requirements for septic and well.
Yeah.
Which for philosophical reasons was great. Both Attorney Roberts and the outgoing assessor objected to that strenuously, and actually so did the building office, although the nature of their objection was a little less clear to me. Strenuously to that because they said it just created too many problems in terms of valuation, and it was fine. So we bumped it down. We arrived at the 1 acre minimum because 40,000 square feet is pretty much where you land with the minimum lot size under most circumstances for a safe separation of septic and water. It is possible if you have a perfectly flat, perfectly draining lot. I talked to Janet Blanchett about this, to get down to like a half acre, but that's an exception to a general rule. So that was just, it was a safe place to land that disrupted fewer properties ultimately, because R40 is unimpacted by that. So it's really just reducing the requirement that somebody buy more land than perhaps they would want to in R80, while you could still buy as much land as you wanted. It's just saying we're not going to force you to buy more land than you do want. And that's that's how that argument shook out.
So I don't know, do you have that colored map of where the rural residential agricultural district is, just so I have a visual?
Let me see if I have it.
And while you're looking that up, so we're talking about single family dwellings, home occupations, farm stands can go here, rural businesses, country inns, campgrounds, sand and gravel extraction, multifamily dwellings, gasoline filling stations. Oh no, sorry, that's not allowed. Okay, sorry, I'm just going down the list here, because every time I go on other meetings in town, I'll just say it, the Board of Finance, cutting out of the school. I want this group to think about tax revenue, right? So we need to come up with a way to be able to get more people here and collect more taxes. Now, it's good that Paul brought up that.
Whoa.
Go ahead, Bob.
Getting more people here does not mean we're going to get more taxes.
Yeah.
In fact, the studies I've seen over my 35 years in planning and zoning is that the more people you get, the higher your property tax goes. It's simple, it's numbers. Every dollar that you collect, costs you $1. Last I knew it was $1.26.
Yeah.
So that's not true.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
There's differing kinds of implications for all of these changes. Where we would potentially get more tax revenue in a residential sense is actually in the R20. And Paul and I talked about that too. So one of the things that we did propose in the former R20, now mostly called Common Residential District, is we retrofitted to reduce nonconformities, the minimum lot size to 4,500 square feet, which is ever so slightly smaller than the smallest existing residential lot. That would theoretically give somebody with an acre lot or a half acre lot in that district the ability to subdivide, in which case you get primary lots, more primary lots, which are taxed at a higher rate. So that is an area where you could theoretically see density-driven increase in tax rates, which is in keeping with the way sort of normal development happens, right? The desirable place to live is in the center with the walkability, the livability. You have your amenities. It's denser and closer together. But for a good number of people, that's more desirable, and the properties themselves become more valuable over time. So that's fairly normal. In terms of some of the other stuff, what everybody talks about on Board of Finance is this, this idea that businesses need to come in here, and the business tax rates are what bring the revenue. And all of that is true. That those things are addressed separately in our zoning discussions by making it easier to actually have a business here. You can have one here now, but the regulatory structure in place until we have our whatever iteration of this draft we agree on, what's in place now is nowhere near as flexible, friendly, adaptable as what we are proposing. So that's where you're going to get your business revenue, is when you have a desirable environment in which, a business could locate.
That's in the corridor.
Yeah.
In the corridor, mostly the corridor, the downtown Mill District, and the flexibility that we've given in what has been called the industrial district, but has been renamed the business development district.
So is the rural?
Brian, I brought that map. I brought that map up. Can you see that? Yeah.
Thank you for the explanation and thank you for the map. What color are we looking at here? Because I can't see the bottom of your screen. Is it the purple? I'm assuming it's the purple.
Which one are you wanting to look at?
The rural residential, the one that we're talking
That's
about.
almost everything. This pale green.
It's everything. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so with all of that little preamble, and we did go a little bit out of order for logical purposes. Oh, what did I do to my screen here?
Well, we'll go with what Bob just outlined, and Terry, your explanation. I'm okay with either one, either an acre or a 2 acre, and I'll defer to others.
Hold on, I'm having trouble with my screen. For God's sake, show grid. Somehow I minimized the whole thing and I can't see anybody, and I'm trying to find I have no idea how I did that.
Hit escape. Hit escape.
Oh, I think it's because I'm screen sharing. Aha, that's why. Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's discuss some of these other points point by point. Joe, you wanna take it from here?
Yeah, yes. And thank you, Paul. Thank you. Welcome to your new position. And thanks for spending a considerable amount of time with us here tonight.
You're welcome to stick around, Paul, in case they still need you.
I'll stick around and listen, just in case.
Yeah, so to just sort of go piece by piece, the first sort of discussion that Tira recommends we have is the footprint of the industrial zone, which is of course not known as the industrial zone anymore, the business development district. I think we talked a lot about this. I think this is sort of the part of the it felt to me a lot like the part of these regulations that we had the greatest consensus on earliest. But there are some comments raising concern about what that means for going forward.
Yeah, I mean, just to tag on that, I feel like we litigated this pretty well. I mean, we've talked about this as a group for over 2 years. And what we have in the proposed draft is what we as a group, not always with everybody in every meeting, but in consensus, decided was philosophically the direction we wanted to go. Now, we are addressing citizen contributions here, Christine Campbell, Diana Couture, Bernie Davis, because they have not been able to be a part of that conversation prior. So it's worth looking at these things again in case there's things that haven't been considered. Just write an order in the comments received. C. Campbell, I do not want industrial businesses to be placed directly around my home. I live in a residentially zoned area that has only woods and homes. I responded to this woman directly. And this also ties into some of the comments that Bernie Davis had about the industrial zone. He and I had a very spirited, in fact, email back and forth on this, a good-natured one. So his contention is that an industrial zone is usually on the borderlines of a town so that it doesn't infringe on the residential properties. However, in order to create that, we would have to take residential zones and convert them to that. So the footprint that we have renamed Business Development District is the same as the industrial or commercial districts previously. They're just a different color with different names. So if you receive in conversation an objection that we're changing the kinds of zones, that's not true. This person will be no closer to a business zoned property than she is today. right? She abuts the Speedway, actually. So the Speedway's going to be there tomorrow. It was there yesterday. Whatever we call that zone that it's in, the Speedway is still there. There is no piece of that business development zone that abuts her. Therefore, there will be no business development zone use that will abut her in the future. So I think a lot of the anxiety that came out of some of the general comments from the public and the ones that have been floating around on the intertubes have been related to a misunderstanding of what is happening in the renaming of the districts. They think because they're being renamed, they're different, they're moved, they're this, they're that. None of that is true. The footprint of the community is fundamentally the same. It's just that the uses within the individual districts are better articulated for a more resilient community going forward. What I do think Bernie has a good point about in the industrial zone has more to do with how intense a level of industry you want to accept in general. Manufacturing means a lot of different things, right? Bernie's old company does mill work. You know, it's guys with CNC mills and routers, and you know, it's labor intensive, direct to consumer, whereas somebody smelting iron, right, is a different kind of intensive, has an environmental impact, has a big footprint that may or may not be in the character of the kind of uses you want to allow. So an increased scrutiny of the kind of industrial use within the district is probably in order. But I think that unless you want to have more of it, you can't really change where it is.
Yeah, I think that comes, I think the manufacturing levels come up a little bit later in the guide. I want to point out that Mr. Lenke returned to the meeting at 7:41 p.m. Just for the record.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Yeah, so in terms of where the business development district is there any strong feeling that changes need to be made to what has been determined, what has been put into this draft? To Tira's point, there is a later conversation when we get into the districts, I think it is, Tira, maybe?
Yeah.
What does manufacturing in that district look like? But any concerns about the footprint of the districts as we've drafted them?
Are you just talking about the industrial district?
Specifically the business development district.
You.
Okay, hearing no strong objection, I'll move on to the second question, which harkens to the Lake District, which I think, Cindy, is maybe what you had wanted to jump in on.
Well, you're combining that Lake District, which you pretty much can't build on anyway until you get the septic and well approval. I just feel like there's just there's not any separate consideration for looking at that lake. And I look at those two lake districts, and it probably means, you know, going to really higher up professional help that people have dealt with lake districts in the communities. So it's a cluster now. These regulations aren't going to change that cluster. It will always be a cluster. So I don't know what the answer is to that.
Like the horse is already out of the barn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I understand wanting to make accommodations for these properties because people own them and they want to be able to use their properties. But if you establish that public health is a consideration and a concern of the commission, and we know that the properties which have private sewerage and wells in those areas don't conform to the standard, the sympathy that you might have does not overwhelm the health concern. and maybe there's another perspective on this. I'm not saying that I have the exhaustive view on this, but it seems to me that we don't have a compelling reason to allow permanent construction where permanent construction has been articulated should not be allowed under other circumstances.
Sure, whatever. It's just going to continue to always be a problem. And maybe Alvin, because he was involved in, the zoning and the building, that he can identify with that concern too. I don't know. So.
Well, is there anything we could do to change it? I mean, are they saying, do you find that they're asking for things that are not being allowed now, but is there a way to look at that and maybe see if?
Yes, my first answer to them when they come in with a .08 lot that they want to build a cottage on, which I had actually Monday. They're thinking about joining it with another lot that they own. So that'd be .16. I said, well, before you do anything, go to the Northeast District Department of Health.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have a house there already, I said, you have to stay in that footprint. So they said, oh, that means we can go up. I said, yeah, it means you can go up as long. They do have septic and well, but it's so old, is the health department going to approve it? And of course, with the health department, there's no grandfather clause. You have to keep yourself up to current health standards. So I just think whoever's sitting in that office, I just think it's going to always be a big issue in the town. And perhaps it's a big issue in other towns.
Tira, when we, I don't remember the conversation about scrapping the lake protection overlay. Do you recall what the commission's, was that, yeah, I mean, how did we come to that? Was it because it didn't do what we wanted?
I'll be honest, Joe, I don't remember a lot about it, except that the suggested overlay district map that had been provided for us was essentially like the whole residential zone, because we've got so much water in town. So I think that the main objection was that it was not specific enough to the needs of that district to be useful. So we scrapped it.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chair. I think that's what happened with that.
Yeah. Watershed areas. I think it relied on watershed areas, and they were humongous.
What'd you say?
Yeah,
Caroline?
and everybody kind of looked. Well, she's saying that the areas were humongous, and everybody looked at it and went, "What is this?" And we kind of said, "Forget about it." I mean, it's a clear public health issue.
Right.
So we can't override NDDH. We've already broken down minimum lot sizes throughout all the residential district to 1 acre minimum. If the lot is a legally existing non-conforming lot, it legally exists tomorrow, no matter what we do.
Oh.
Yep.
However, they still can't put a septic system in if there's no room for one, no matter what we tell them. So I don't know what the benefit to the commission is ultimately to carve out exceptions for these properties. I don't know what exceptions we can make that are reasonable. And maybe Carolyn or Alvin has some more insight into that. But to me, they just should be not permanently buildable. And if they want to have campers there, I'm okay with that because it's a property use and they own the property and they want to enjoy it. But permanent residences are probably out of bounds.
Well, Kira, also, we got to keep in mind that science and engineering, et cetera, is advancing rather rapidly. So an engineer can design a system that could probably fit on a postage stamp. You know what I mean? It's like, not quite, but you know what I mean? Engineering is now to the point where, like we look at the old lateral out, so many feet of lateral this way and that way. But they can design systems that
are very compact. Yes.
Very compact, and they can. Thank you.
Well, the only the only concession then that I see that makes sense is to actually go back to our original idea for these districts, which you could say there's no minimum lot size, but it must satisfy NDDH requirements. So it puts the burden on the property owner to do the engineering, and if they can demonstrate that the engineering is there, maybe we can allow them to do it. I mean, that's a reasonable compromise, I think.
What is being suggested here? I'm a little bit at a loss, I'm sorry. We're talking about the lakes.
We're talking just about the lake districts and Cindy's concerns, which are legitimate because she gets, you know, issues in there all the time, that there is no carve out for those properties.
What do you mean by carve out? There's no minimum lot size, or what do you mean by, I'm sorry.
Well, so the objection is that there's no accommodation for these little hodgepodge properties that are teeny tiny because they're in an R40. So technically they're not buildable, but people want to build there and the lots exist. That's the problem.
Okay, so basically under the current regulations, what would happen is they have to work it out with the health department.
Under the current regulations.
Well, it's still, they would have to work it out under new regulations too.
Right, they would need to be able to satisfy the setbacks that would be required by the health department, whatever those, you know, ordinances are.
That could be made to be the case because we took out the Lake District overlay. It is not currently the case. Right now, the whole thing is R40 and they have to conform to that, or rural residential agriculture.
You're talking about Little Pond for the most part?
No, both Aquatic Lake and Little Pond.
Okay.
I mean, Little Pond's
So
worse.
it's R40, and if it's a lot of record, then they simply have to conform to the requirements of the health department, don't they?
Correct.
Yeah.
But that's not how it's articulated in the current draft. That's the motivation for having an overlay. Because so many lots are non-conforming, even when we reduce the non-conformities throughout the district by reducing the minimum lot size, it doesn't address these minimums. So the lots still exist, they're still non-conforming, and the complication of building isn't directly addressed by the language that we have in the proposed draft.
Right, but wouldn't the controlling legal issue be if it's a lot of record, it would be a taking if you tell them they can't use it?
Can't do that.
Yes, but if they're building a house on a lot of record, they still have to do the required setbacks in that district.
Right, right. So they have to control more area than they've got.
Right,
They would have to
by going on the setbacks for the, whatever we're changing the districts to.
Okay. I'm sorry if I held you up.
No, it's you're not holding anybody up, Carolyn. It's an unresolved question because we purged the overlay, and the question is, do we add something back in to accommodate or not? I still have the original language from the NECOG draft. I can go back and look at it and see if there's anything of value there, you know, to try to solve this problem.
Well,
or we could let it ride.
Yeah, Mr. Krogel?
Yes, just for my clarification, please. We're talking about non-conforming lots at this point, basically, more than anything else. Existing non-conforming lots.
Well,
pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. But you're also talking about lots where people want to make their structure of the dwelling larger too.
All right, but if we're now talking like a quarter-acre lot in R40 zone, what I'm hearing is they must conform or comply to the zoning for the R40 for their septic, whereas if it passes the Board of Health specifications, it shouldn't really matter what size lot it is as long as it's in there on an existing conforming or grandfathered lot.
It's a grandfathered lot, even if it's in the R40, and the only thing for the zoning with the grandfathered lot is that they have to meet the existing setbacks.
Right.
And of course, they have to meet the health
The-
department's requirements.
Existing
And if there's a
setbacks of-
structure there that they want to
Which
tear,
existing setbacks are we talking?
well, you're talking 25
It
feet
was-
back, rear, sides, and 50 feet front.
Right, if they are existing grandfathered lots, they should have to fit the zoning, if there was any at the time, of when they were originated, not what you are making now standards to. Because that's just basically telling them you're not gonna build anything. If
I'm
you have a-
not following you at all, so I'm sorry.
No, I'm following him, but
If you have a
it's all
around
different
it.
versions of the same problem.
Mhm.
The lot exists. The lot's going to exist tomorrow. The lot existed yesterday. It exists because it was legally drawn up. But the lots in question are so small and they are in a water area that the issue of septic and well is particularly critical. However, if
But again-
people own them, they want to be able to use them. So there's no compelling interest to allow somebody to build a house where we know their septic is going to fail. Right?
But that's
We can't.
health, that's up to the health department to design the septic and the well situation to meet the standards that they need. Like Bob said, technology is coming along so far that a septic system of 10 years ago can be probably downsized by 90% nowadays,
Or less.
or less.
Oh, yeah, I don't.
Well, I don't know, but
Yeah,
Let me suggest this, and I think it'll enable us to move on. Why don't I get in touch with Linda Colangelo,
Yes.
ask her what she thinks the solution is to add it as an article, as a section in this article for the rural residential agricultural district. Not necessarily as an overlay, but identifying somehow some carve-outs that acknowledge that this is an area of existing nonconformity, and how we want to articulate that they have the right to build there with the NDDH approval. I
excuse
mean,
me.
it's not in our jurisdiction that it's NDDH approval, but stating it says that we're aware of this problem and this is your process.
Are we talking about the lake or rural residential? I'm a little-
The lakes.
The lakes are in the rural residential agricultural district.
Right.
Oh, okay.
But they have.
But we're talking about the lakes, not the,
They have.
We are specifically talking about the lakes right at this second.
yes, okay.
Yeah.
So in that discussion with Linda, you also have to add that people want to upgrade a falling down cottage. Like this call that I got the other day is they have a cottage non-conforming and they want to put a year-round home there. Good luck with that.
So that might be a bridge too far, because that's a change of use from a temporary to,
no,
well,
it's
anyway,
a-
that's
no, it's
that's
a
neither here nor
structure.
there. I'll talk to Linda. I'll talk to Linda about it, and that'll enable us to move on.
Yeah, I think
I
that,
think.
yeah,
that's
that'll
a good
give it
idea.
some insight.
so what?
Thank,
Tyra,
great, thank you.
Tyra,
You're,
Who's
I
that?
had, well, Tyra, just one question too in my mind is, we haven't talked about permeability, soil conditions around the lake. I mean, if they want to expand, I think somewhere in the regs, we're talking, there's something about permeability.
Yeah, in each district, there's a statement of what the maximum impervious surface is.
Right, exactly.
Right, so theoretically, they would have to conform to that as well, except in as far as they're already non-conforming.
Right. Right. And that would shut down a lot, whatever. I mean, Bob likes to talk about science. But you can take what are we going to do with the byproduct of human waste? You can't put it down to zero. It needs a certain amount of space.
Put a rocket.
Period.
Agree.
Believe me, so I'm aware that some people need more space than others.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
You might say more breathing room.
Joseph?
All right, let's table that until after I've talked to Linda. And I'll just adjust accordingly. I think that's the only solution that makes any sense.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah, thank you very much, Tara. Our next
So
question.
there's your big question number 3.
Yeah, is the question about the rural residential agricultural district, which essentially encompasses what we know now as the R40 and the R80 as one district. This is what Paul was speaking about a little bit earlier, some of the effects of that. As Tara mentions in her comment, it's something that we've seemed to have philosophically gotten behind in the drafting of this document, but in response to some comments from staff and citizens, bears a conversation again. Are we comfortable with combining R40 and R80, RA40 and R40 and RA80 into the rural residential agricultural district?
Well, I don't have a vote, but I'll say no.
I'm not comfortable with it either. I prefer keeping R40 and R80 separate. This is
Okay, so this is obviously something where you guys need a voice vote. And I will point out that you have already litigated this and already agreed to it, but in the interest of full transparency and consideration of the concerns raised, I will also point out that the only difference that would exist between the two zones is that one item. So you would be repeating identical information into two districts with no other function than to separate minimum lot sizes. Which, by the way, oh, I almost forgot. Before we go to that voice vote, let me demonstrate to you how, and I did send this around, but I don't know if anybody looked at it yet. So the green space chart, yes. Where'd it go?
Yeah, got it. Read it.
Yeah.
Looked at it.
Yeah.
Good. So an argument that was made about retaining 2-acre minimum lots was that it was somehow more conservation friendly. I understand why somebody would think that, by the way. On the surface, it seems to make sense. But allow me to show you what the math actually looks like. Now, obviously, this is a hypothetical situation. We don't deal with straight lines very often. Here is the same 1,000 feet broken into 100-foot frontage separations, which is what we proposed, but the math is the math no matter how you do it. Here's 2-acre lot minimum, 10 of them in a row. There's 10 1-acre lots in a row, 1,000 feet long, 3 acres deep. Where do you see more conserved space? Right, the conservation argument for larger lot sizes makes assumptions that you cannot assume to be true. It assumes that a person maintains their 2+ acres in a conservation-friendly way. It'll tell you you're more likely to put a bigger house on a 2-acre lot. You're more likely to put an in-ground pool on a 2-acre lot. You're more likely to convert more of the surrounding area to lawn. All of those things are not conservation-friendly. A smaller house footprint, less lawn, more available unowned open space is the conservation-friendly way to go. And there's no prohibition on owning a larger lot. It's just saying we recognize that not everybody wants a larger lot, and we have no compelling reason to force them to own a larger lot.
Unless they're an R80.
Well, if you don't mind, Mike,
please,
on this. Yeah, I see your argument, and one of the elements of being in this town is it still has a rural character, and there are a lot of people that live here that like that and want that. So regardless of whether it's 1 acre or 2 acres, personally, I think we should stay with the 150 frontage.
Yes, I do too.
Otherwise, we're making it into little cities down every block,
And also,
or every road. I
and
mean.
also what you're doing is you're encouraging development to the point for, and I'll give you the road I live on. I live on Lowell Davis Road, and the next road over is Stawicki. We have a huge conservation, or whatever you want to call it, a wildlife corridor. We have a wildlife corridor between our two roads, right? Now, if you put 100 foot, a developer's going to say, wow, 100 foot, I can put a road between those two roads and put up a zillion lots, and there goes my wildlife corridor. So there are other implications to changing the R40 and R80 zone, and that's one. Thank you.
I don't disagree with you about the compelling reason to not fragment wildlife corridors. I am of the opinion that that is better addressed in how you form your subdivision regulations. You want to discourage the conditions that permit new roads to be built.
Well,
Roads are losers for the town, and they are bad for wildlife. On that, you and I agree.
Yes.
But for individual property owners, the compelling interest of the town to demand a higher lot size is, to me, and it's up to you guys, to me that is sketchy at best. It does not really stand up to the conservation argument. Again, the bigger the lot size, the bigger the house is likely to be, the higher the energy footprint, the more of that land is outside the control of being conservation space or open space. You're assuming that a person with a large lot doesn't put a lawn on 10 acres. A 10-acre lawn is a conservation nightmare.
No, but Tara, the argument too is there's less of them. You're saying it's a bigger house and blah, 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 blah. Fine, but there's a lot less of them if instead of 100 foot and a whole bunch of little ones.
You can only fit a certain number of lots on a frontage, no matter which frontage you choose. Using the 100 because it divides easily, and that example of the 1,000 feet, you can fit, and we'll use the 100 just for the math, but you can do the math for the 150. I don't care. You fit the same number of lots for frontage on the same stretch of road, no matter how deeply they cut into the land behind it.
Right.
So you can control with your frontage to a certain extent the amount of density. I have arguments against that too, but I'm certainly, all these things are up to you guys. You can do that. The key piece is that you want to discourage road building and lots stacked up one behind another.
Yes.
You've already articulated it a little bit with one flag lot. The rest of it has to be taken care of in the subdivision.
Sure.
Yep.
Agree.
I think by keeping the two zones, particularly the R80, which is by far the larger of the two, we are keeping the essence of Thompson as a rural community. Once you start putting a whole bunch of houses together, you're going to have what you have in the R20 zones, a bunch of houses stuck together, and there's no rural advantage. And wildlife is one. There are others. I mean, I go out my backyard and watch turkeys running around because I have the corridor. Without that corridor, I don't have turkeys. I don't have deer. I don't have a rural home. I know people on my road that put cameras up in their backyard to watch the deer go through. And, it's.
Hey, I'm right there with you, Bob. I'm not saying there are no larger lot size permitted. I live on a 2-acre lot. I don't, that's the lot that we bought. Our neighbor has 14 acres. We've got a corridor here. I would also probably be bummed out if somebody, cut deeply into that. But the controlling of the cutting into it is articulated in a separate set of regulations.
Yes.
You guys just have to decide this now, because what you're going to decide is if we have two identical districts with identical allowances, except in one district you have to have more money to live there. That's what it is. It is an exclusionary zoning policy. If you guys want to retain that, it's fine. But the conservation argument, although I understand it, doesn't hold up when you look at it just as the zoning regulations. For the acreage. I'm not talking about frontage now. I'm talking about the acreage.
Yeah, but why is it exclusionary? I mean, the lot.
Because it costs more money to buy 2 acres than 1 acre. You're creating a higher threshold for home ownership.
So my
Yes,
question,
But I thought that Paul discussed today that the difference in the value is a couple of $1,000 because
The
each
difference
one
in the
technically is a
assessment,
building lot.
the difference in the assessment,
In the
not the difference in the values are set by the market. The assessment value is what determines. Oh, Paul wants to talk. Hold on. Oh, you're unmuted, Paul.
Oh, I'm glad he's still there.
Yeah, $1,900 is the difference.
So
Okay,
since we just did a revaluation for 2019, one I would make is our values should be very close to what market is. So the numbers I provided earlier, as of October of 19, would be, for all intents and purposes, what the market would bear. That's all I wanted to contribute.
Thank you.
so I have a question. We keep throwing the word out, inclusionary. What is wrong with that? What is wrong with someone coming into a community and say, you know what, I can afford 2 acres. I want this behind me. I don't want people next door to me. Is there something wrong with that?
No, there's nothing wrong with saying you want it personally, what you personally want to buy. The moral hazard comes when you demand that somebody must meet a certain income level threshold in order to move into an area. It creates a higher threshold.
That's weak.
It creates a higher threshold for home ownership. Look, it's up to the commission. It's not up to me. It's not up to Cindy.
Right.
It's up to the 7 people here tonight. But we have litigated this before, and this was the argument that you guys found convincing before. If you've changed your mind based on commentary, that is absolutely your right. But when the draft comes out, it's going to be 2 identical districts with one exception, that in one district you would have 2-acre minimum zoning, and in one district you would have 1-acre minimum zoning.
And the
There is
problem
no
with that,
other functional district.
and the problem with
that
that
is
is,
that it is.
you don't have to answer
There's
that.
no compelling interest for it. There's
Of
no
course-
compelling interest
Of course
to
there is for
tell a
people who want
person
2
who wants
acres.
to move into a community that they must buy more property than they need.
Oh, God.
And they move into another community or another zone. I mean,
They're
it's
gonna
plain.
go to Putnam. They're going to
Yeah,
Putnam.
go to Putnam.
You guys can do whatever you want with
Okay,
this.
so I
It's just a
think-
copy and paste. It's just a
Yeah.
copy and paste function for me, and it's an extra, 10 pages in your book. It's fine. It's fine.
I
But you
think
guys
we
need to
have-
vote on it because
Yeah.
you have previously said
Mr.
that you
Chairman.
agreed to this. If you've changed your mind, go ahead.
Well, we got some.
Can I add one? Can I add one?
Mr. Hell?
Yes. We're debating flat world order here. So let me state that the topography, the land use, the curvature of the land in Thompson is such that to have a 1,000-foot stretch of land flat enough to put in 10 homes doesn't exist.
Agreed. Agreed. It's a mathematical model only, just for
The
clarification, that
topography,
on the same
the
length of road, the frontage controls how many houses, not the acreage.
it's the topography of the town that will regulate
Right,
how much building will happen here.
correct.
Could I also just throw in the fact that if you're going to have a 2-acre minimum with only 100 feet of frontage, that's going to go deeper.
Which is
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
counterproductive to.
No.
Okay, yeah, so thank you, Carolyn. That's a valid point. I think it's a little bit separate. Like we do, later in the discussion guide, there is a conversation about frontages.
Well, what?
Frontage.
About the frontage levels. I think it's related but separate from the acreage issue. So with that I am going to move that we vote on one district or two districts. Okay, the vote will be one district, one rural residential agricultural district, or two districts to be named later.
All right, this is only a vote of a subcommittee. This is not a vote of the commission.
This,
Is that correct?
I mean,
This is the vote of everybody who showed up to this meeting. The subcommission is the subcommittee is the whole commission.
yeah.
Well,
I mean,
I don't think we should vote on an issue like this unless we have 10 members, a full commission. You can't do this right now.
Bob, we've got a quorum of a meeting. That's, I mean,
Right.
It's quorum of a meeting, but we're
All the
making
others chose not to be here.
yeah, you know, we can't, you know, this meeting was called at a
Sufficient amount of time.
yeah, I mean, decisions are made by those who show up, Bob.
Yeah, if I leave, you only got 5.
No.
That's not true. So the motion has been made.
I'll make it a point. I very strongly think we live in a rural community, and I'd like to keep it that way. I moved here because I didn't want to be hemmed in. I want to be in a rural community. Now, if you guys want to change that.
So Bob, just 1 minute. A motion has been made. I'm waiting for a second, and then we can discuss the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion has been made by the chair, seconded by Mr. Santos. The vote will be one district or two. Any discussion on the motion? I recognize Mr. Wurge.
Yes. Not only 2, but I would like to keep the frontage as it is, 150 foot frontage, 50-foot setback, etc. In other words, keep the rural part of this town the same way it is. Don't change that. I'm in favor of just keeping it the way it is.
Thank you, Mr. Wurge.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Santos, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the group and myself, we're not voting on whether or not that, if it's combined to one, whether or not it's 1 acre or 2, right? It's just whether or not we're combining them.
You know, that's a valid point. I was operating under the assumption that the one district would have a 1 acre.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. If I just say respectfully, Bob, I don't think I don't think that creating one rural residential agricultural district, which covers a vast majority of the town, will destroy the rural nature of what you love, what I love, what so many of us love. I'm just not convinced that that is what will happen.
Yeah.
And so, and I am a little bit more interested in revisiting the frontage conversation. But I think for a lot of reasons, I think the one rural residential agricultural district is again, like where we, you know, what we had decided through this process, and I think it's a good place to go.
Well, for those of us who have a reasonable, well, not a reasonable, but a larger piece of land, changing it to the one district, I'm going to make a lot of money.
Excellent.
I'm not in favor of it.
Well, there you go. Any
I'm
further
in favor.
discussion on the motion?
That's not our concern, what you can do. Well, what you're saying,
Mr. Lanky, go
Joseph,
ahead.
what you just said, so I can get like I said, I came in a little late on all of this, but what you're saying is you want to take the R40 and the R80 and bring it together as one?
That is how we have drafted. That is what the draft of our regulations says. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And upon your opinion, that's how you feel, correct? That and it doesn't matter about the frontage. We're not even worried about the frontage.
Frontage is a separate conversation.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
I think the frontage should be considered in terms of.
It will be later on.
But that's later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
So,
Hearing none, the votes are 1 district or 2 districts. Mr. Santos,
Brian Santos, 1 district.
Mr. Hill,
Mr. Hill, 2 districts.
Mr. Lenke,
1 district.
Mr. Krogel,
1.
Ms. Langlois,
1.
Mr. Werge,
Is there any doubt? 2.
and Joseph Prody Brown, 1. So the rural residential agricultural district as written in the current draft stays. The next comment should be a little bit quicker. Cindy was wondering if there was a shorthand reference for, as we do now, RA80, R40, R20, any a language of shorthand that we prefer in referring to the districts in the
Well,
draft.
the acronyms for the district.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
I mean, it obviously doesn't change the substance. Right now, they're all written out, and it would be no work to leave them and some work to go in and abbreviate them. But we can pay the editor for that if you like the abbreviated better than the spelled out. They don't get a lot of cross-reference within the sections.
Okay. I mean, is anyone?
I'm thinking about that for like things like with when you pull your property card. Are you going to have it? Are you going to have the assessor's office, right? Residential?
No, that's a great point, Cindy. That's
Yeah.
a great point. So I will, yeah, when I send it for editing, I'll have that added in as well. Abbreviations added. You got it.
Yeah, and on applications and everything, it's just easier to write R whatever or C whatever.
Yeah. So
An
RRA,
excellent point.
RRA or TCV, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
right, exactly. Yeah.
You got it.
There's a question about comments about the tables. This is, I think, a conversation that we had gone back and forth on ourselves in terms of different things. But the idea that each district has a table of what's permitted, what's permitted by which level of permitting, what's permitted, what's not permitted. Is there benefit in, I think I agree with.
Where are you at, Joe?
We're on page 24, the couple of comments about the way the tables of uses are formatted. Al Landry had submitted a handwritten comment to me that he prefers one single table of uses. I wouldn't object to adding a single table of uses as an appendix for people who want a zoomed out view. But if I'm a property owner in the rural residential district and I want to know, I don't care what somebody in the business development district can do. There might be reasons why a person might want to look at all of that, and we can make that available. But it would be a very visually complicated table.
I 1000% agree. I think that having the tables in the districts is logical and makes sense. And I think adding it as an appendix does us no harm, and it may help people.
Yeah, doing an appendix on it would help reference when you're trying to, the staff people when you're trying to reference something. That would be big, because other towns do that. Other towns have it.
I can do that.
Any objection?
Nope.
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 Okay.
Onward.
Well, so we're on 24.4A.
No.
Section 2, table of permitted uses.
Well, I
Yes,
made
ma'am.
a comment. Yeah,
Yeah.
table of permitted uses. Are we going to alphabetize it because it jumps all over the place, or categorize it into different subjects? So.
Yeah, whatever you guys prefer. I mean, I do think they
Categorize it.
should be grouped by intensity. But yeah, whether they're category or alphabetized in that is, I think, the style point that needs to, I mean, what do you guys think looks better?
I think alphabetical by intensity makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
easy.
easy to reference when it's like that.
Great.
All right, it
More,
is done.
I thought, oh yeah, I guess I did jump ahead, yeah. I was jumping ahead to the question about ADUs.
Oh, you're on ADUs. Okay, I see where you are, Joe.
Where are you now, Joe?
Right under, there's a chart of the single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, accessory apartments.
All right, well, above that, let's see. I had asked a question. So the site plan, if somebody needs a site plan to get a permit, that means that they have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand your question here, Cindy. That's just about spelling that out to match the earlier section. That's easy.
Okay, all right.
And then the ADUs is a more substantial question.
Right. Are we going to allow accessory apartments on a single lot or just an accessory apartment on a single lot?
Well, no, that Tira has addressed, and she said she will make it singular accessory apartment. But the further question is the number of accessory dwelling units. For lots with private water or sewer, septic limits those. But are there any limitations we would like to add as a commission to the number of ADUs?
Yeah, and it's just something that didn't come up before, and it probably should have. You know, the point of having the ability to construct an ADU is so that you can monetize your property or move your mother-in-law in or whatever, and that's all fine and easy to understand. But we never discussed whether you wanted to limit the number of such things. I mean, maybe you've got 13 kids and you all want them to live. You know, is that permissible? That seems sketchy, but we haven't articulated it. That's all.
I'm going to excuse myself, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I mean that's the will of the commission. Is there a way we would like to address the number of ADUs on a property?
Joe, what article, where are you?
Yeah, sorry. So this is page 24, Article 4A, Section 2.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there, I don't think there's a limit now. Is there, do you know, Tara?
Well, I don't think ADUs are addressed at all in the current regulation.
Well, they're accessory structures, yeah.
Well, I suppose, yeah. Although a dwelling unit is different in form and function than a structure. I mean, you can have a garage, you can have a barn, you can have a shed. They have different requirements than an ADU, which has septic requirements and utility requirements.
Oh, wait a minute. Are we talking about accessory buildings or accessory apartments?
We're
talking about accessory dwelling units.
Oh, dwelling unit. Okay, I'm sorry. It's getting late. I apologize.
Didn't we, Joseph, didn't we just go through this a little bit with the house up on Chase, up at Thompson Hill, where they were taking the accessory buildings and making them into dwellings, you know, like the barn and everything? Excuse me?
I'm sorry, were you talking about the tree houses?
No, up at Thompson Hill, right by Marianapolis. The people that just bought doing that property.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Mason House.
The Mason House, thank you. Then, you know, they were changing, adding in, you know, the dwellings, you know, the barn or something with the garage below it upstairs. So pretty much, if you're gonna go use that as an example, right there, take it from there.
You could use that as an example, but since the primary use of the property is not residential, I don't think it's a one-to-one relationship. So this is somebody who has a house, who decides to build a smaller house on their property, either to have a family member there or to rent it out. An accessory dwelling unit is what they call missing middle housing. It's small housing that allows a person to either monetize their property more fully by having a tenant in an independent structure that presumably in a community like this would tie into their own septic, or potentially to house a family member. Who lives there is not our concern. The concern is we've stated that we want to allow people to have them, but do we want to limit the number of them that we would permit?
No, well, let me see. Well, for Tara?
Yes.
For an example, just up the road from me here on, well, it'll be 131, which is Quinnabar Road, and the Brickhead. My friend who passed away, when he was selling that property where the church is, he had to sell the property with 3 acres because the original property with the house had an outside dwelling, like a guest house or something, and he needed the 3 acres, and it had to be tied in with his septic system. It was tied in with his regular septic system. So he had to meet the requirements there by the health board too. So, and I'm looking at, there has to be a requirement of X amount of acreage too, right?
Well, there is a certain amount of self-limitation in that any district that has private water or sewer, the septic is determined by the number of bedrooms and the acreage, and that's in the engineering done in the planning. So that there is self-limitation. I mean, you're highly unlikely to get somebody who's going to be physically able to build, say, 6 on their property. The question is, if somebody wants to build 6 on their property, should they be permitted to do so?
Yeah, so I guess I have 2 questions. You indicate that it's a minority of properties which this would even be an issue with, aside from the right? Is there to go back to your question, is there a compelling interest in our limiting the numbers, and if so,
what is it?
What is it, and how do we get there?
Well, one of the compelling interests, if somebody has 3 acres, and as long as they meet the requirements for structure, and so they can put 6 houses on 3 acres. And so someone's next door to them and they have 1 house. Do you want to be living in a section that has a lot of tenants? That's all I'm saying. So
that is an argument for limiting the number.
Right.
So if, assuming the commission accepts that argument, which I think is reasonable in this case for a couple of different reasons, what is that limit? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? I think once you get beyond 2 or 3, you're really getting into the realm of the unreasonable. But that is a personal preference, right? We've got to be careful about personal preferences versus what is actually compelling.
Yeah. Brian?
Forgive me for asking this because I may have missed it, but the way the regulations are written right now, if you wanted an ADU, now what do you have to do? Do you have to submit an application and just make sure that the sewer is working?
no, you have to go to the zoning commission.
You just have to get approval for it. So
Yep.
there's an unlimited amount of dwelling units that could be put in right now as long as it's approved.
That I don't know. I'm sitting relaxing on the couch with the zoning book is on the table. Do you want me to go reach for it?
Sorry, sir. No.
I've got the.
I don't. All right, so I'll just cut to the chase. I don't know if there's any reason for us not to go above 1 or 2, I at max. But
Yeah.
that's my own opinion. I don't know.
I
1
would say
sounds
2
good to
is
me.
max.
I happen to agree with Brian.
I agree too.
So what are you guys all agreeing to? That you think that there should be a limit of 1
Yeah,
or a
I'm
limit of
saying
2?
I'm going to say 1.
Limit. I think that's reasonable, by the way. I'm not arguing for or against anything. I think that there are slightly different issues with numbers of ADUs than with the other things that I would think are inclusionary.
I could be convinced to go to 2, but right now I'm just going to say 1. Be done.
I was thinking 1, and then I thought about families that might have
Yeah.
parents that are separate, remarried, and then there's another
Yeah, that's what I was
in-law.
thinking about too, Charlene.
So then I was thinking 2. God bless you.
Okay, thank you.
Bless you.
Yeah, I don't think 2 is unreasonable. Again, assuming all the other criteria are met.
Yeah. All right, I'm in. Let's do 2. Do we have to motion that, or what do you want to do?
May as well. It'll provide clarity.
I'll make a motion to adopt a maximum of 2 ADUs in whatever district we're talking about. I can't remember anymore.
Well, this would be probably in all of them,
All of them?
because
Okay, fine.
this is an identical item in all zones.
In all zones.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Santos to adopt a maximum of 2 ADUs on any lot. Seconded by Ms. Langlois. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, it'll be a yes to adopt. Mr. Santos.
Brian Santos, yes.
Mr. Hill.
Alvin Hill, yes.
Mr. Lenke.
Yes.
Mr. Krogel.
Yes.
Ms. Langlois.
Yes.
I got to find it.
Mr. Wurge is not back yet, I believe. Is that right?
No, he's done for the night.
Okay, thank you.
Do we still have a quorum? We do still have a quorum, right?
You still have a quorum. Joseph
Okay.
Purdy Brown votes yes. Okay. The next item is one that requires no action, nor the next one. The next item, so this is Article 4A, Section 2, Table of Permitted Uses, Item 16. Any other uses not anticipated in these regulations, but reasonably related to the intended purpose of this district as determined by the commission. So this gets to the fact that it's not in the regulations as allowed, it's not mentioned in the regulations, it's prohibited. So we were trying to give ourselves a little wiggle room to, just as it says, allow unanticipated uses. There's some concern about the subjectivity, which is definitely reasonable. So our question is, do we want to strike this and just anything that's not in the regulations is therefore prohibited? We want to amend it, or do we want to keep this statement as is?
Surely somebody has some feelings on this matter other than me.
I was trying to move around, so I didn't hear the whole thing. Sorry. Just say it one more time.
Yeah, so basically it's the last item allows, gives the commission the ability to consider uses that aren't mentioned in the regulations. In general, if it's not mentioned, it's not allowed, it's prohibited. So we were trying to give ourselves a little out. There's some concern about the subjectivity of the statement.
Can you give an example? Like what are you talking about?
Well, I mean, I would argue, for example, like I already mentioned them, but those tree houses weren't necessarily a use that were in our regulations. we interpreted them as something that did fall within our regulations. But if it was not our interpretation that that use fell into one of those uses, then we would have said, nope, it's a great idea, but not here. You can't have it, it's prohibited. So this language gives us a little bit more of that flexibility.
I like flexibility.
I
Because
agree.
we never know, times are changing. And if 20 years ago, someone would have came and said to the commission, we're gonna make tree houses, they would have been like, what are you talking about? Or they're gonna sign in from over in Alaska and come to North Grovendale and stay in a tree house. People would have no idea. So I think 20 years from now, when somebody's standing in front of the commission with a little wiggle room, it might bring some new things into the town of Thompson, and we shouldn't like cut that off so quick.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's the philosophy of including it, is that we don't know everything that could come before us. We can anticipate a great deal, but we can't anticipate everything.
Yeah.
So that just gives you some allowance. And it is absolutely true that there is some gray area here that has some room for mischief. Nothing's ever going to be risk-free. I think it's an acceptable level of risk.
Yeah, I think it's just part of the process, right? It's okay. I'm good with that. I agree with everyone on the line right now.
Yeah, I don't think you need a voice vote on this because we've decided it previously, but since it was raised, I thought it was worth going over again. Unless somebody like strongly thinks it needs to be discussed again, I think we can move on.
No, I don't. Right.
Move on. Quick.
Okay. Now, in terms of moving on, actually, no, hold on. So there's a general question about development standards. Again, it's similar to the table of uses permitted. We have development standards currently by district. Again, it could be as simple as adding an appendix that puts them all together as well.
But can I make a comment?
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's as simple with the districts. Doing the appendix for the use of the district is new for the town of Thompson. We've never had that before that I know of.
We've never had good zoning regulations either, but we're going to have those.
Can I finish?
You're sorry, Cindy. I'm punchy.
Yeah, we all are. So the dimensional chart that we use now is so convenient, so ready handy to answer questions. So if you keep, and now in these districts, you're going into fractions, and it's like, why are you doing that? Make it simple, make it easy, keep your dimensional chart. Sure, you can put it in the appendix too, but I just think you should keep your dimensional chart.
Okay,
It's just too confusing because each district is just so different. It's like, oh my God. So that's my opinion of it.
So I think there are maybe two separate issues here.
No, it's not two separate issues. Just refer to the dimensional charts to find out what you can do in your district. End of story. That's
Okay,
simple.
Yeah, but if I'm already in the district I want to be in, what's wrong with me having the things right there? And if I'm someone who wants to look at all of them together, I can go to an appendix.
Whatever, but make it easier. Get rid of those dumb fractions in there.
That's a separate issue.
Well, yeah, I do have separate issues on that one. You know, give a foot. Give a foot. So your average person is going to look at that and go, what the hell am I supposed to do? I'm sorry. I forgot this is being recorded. I apologize. Yeah, we are.
Believe me, I'm sure all of us have said worse things on the recording already.
So again, what's the feeling of the commission? Is an appendix the solution? Is one chart only the solution? Is it okay with the district, in each district?
You have one chart, you save a lot of printing.
I think we should make it consistent, like the other chart was in both locations, meaning
Okay, yep.
it's in the zones and then it's in the back. I feel like this should be the same exact.
Okay, Brian, I will concede.
All right.
But just make it easier to refer to it.
Okay. Okay.
Anyone strongly opposed to that course of action? Okay, the next issue is gets into frontage and setbacks. I'm going to suggest that 2 hours and 46 minutes into the meeting is not the time to dive into this.
Oh, come on, Joe. Let's go.
You know, I think Bob.
Where's Carolyn? Carolyn, go wake up Bob.
Good thing.
Oh, dear.
Good thing.
Well, for whatever it's worth, I was going to suggest this be the last item, since some people, including Bob, had strong feelings about the numerical values of the frontage. But this item is not the numerical values of the frontage.
I apologize.
So maybe we could just get this one under our belts and then start with the dimensional requirements at the next meeting. Fair?
I think that's a perfectly reasonable, Tira. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just offer something?
Of course.
Tira, I just did a quick thing here. At 100-foot frontage, I know you're not going to deal with this until next time, but if it's 100-foot frontage and it's a 1 acre lot, it's 100 by 400 feet. If it's 150-foot frontage, it'll be, in its 40,000 square foot lot, it would be 150 by about 266. So that's something to consider, the configuration of the lot. 100 by 400 is almost ridiculous.
It is.
Thank you, Carolyn. I love fact-based submissions.
Okay, folks, I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks, Carolyn.
All right, so let's just resolve this one issue. We'll set the next meeting date, and then you guys have done some great work. Or this one combination of issues. Marla raises an interesting issue that I had not given a lot of thought to previously. I don't think any of us did, about what it means to have frontage in general. And her point is it only on an accepted road? Is that what qualifies as frontage? And she cites some specific instances of some private roads, which are gray areas. Actually, I'm not sure that this even solves that. I mean, I think if it's a question of whether it is in the town's interest to accept frontage on a road that doesn't really exist, I think the answer is no. For some of those conservation reasons and for some maintenance reasons. So that's the one question. The other question is the one that Mike raised, which is an interesting one. And again, I don't think it was given a lot of thought because I don't think it applies in many cases, but I can visualize it applying. So if we can quickly blow through those, you guys are heroes.
Yep. Thank you, Tira. So the first one, the idea of, if it's not a town road, does it offer frontage?
No.
Yeah, I mean.
I would say no.
Okay. I agree with all of that, but I didn't know if anybody had a compelling argument otherwise.
No, I agree with it.
You have to put the word accepted road in there. You might want to check.
Probably.
Yeah.
Council on that.
Accepted town road, yeah. Excellent. And then the next item is the question about the continuous frontage. If it's, if it's 100 feet or if it's 150 feet, what does it matter if it's got a chunk missing out in the middle? Is that the question? But it's still 150 total frontage?
That is the question, only because if we are meeting all the required setbacks or side lots and everything else, does it really matter if it's continuous frontage or not? Because if you do not have continuous frontage, you can still have a, oh geez, I just lost the word, but a house in the back, a What's the word I'm looking for here,
Flag
folks?
lot. Flag lot.
A back lot. So what is the difference between the back lot or having non-continuous frontage?
So that's actually slightly different than I was visualizing. The flag lots, we've already addressed a preference for only having one, and that's based on conservation issues. And those flag lots can have essentially no frontage as far as I know.
50 right now.
At 50 foot.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, 50 foot right now, frontage.
Yeah, there is a few houses that have, few places that have 50-foot fronts,
Yeah,
but they have
because
to
they
have,
have, yes.
right.
So what is the difference? I mean, you know, and I do admit that I do have a horse in this race here, but either way, I could get a house in. But I'm just saying, what does it matter if it's continuous frontage or not, as long as you have your 1 acre or your setbacks, proper setbacks?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I find that argument convincing.
What would be an example of not having a continuous frontage? I don't get that.
Like if you had like frontage, but like another lot.
It would have to be a very irregular lot, and it would probably be something that was grandfathered, or, you know, one or the other lot would probably be a pre-existing, or there would be a topographical, you know, interruption to the frontage. I mean, I can picture that it could exist, although I can't imagine that it would exist in many instances.
Yep.
Because I'm imagining the flag lot. So if you've got 10 acres and you want to do a flag lot, you cut into your frontage, and so then you give that person the frontage to get to their lot, and then you would have to have an easement to go over that driveway. Yeah, I'm confused. Okay. I'm just trying to imagine what that would be, Mike. That's all.
Well,
I mean, for whatever it's worth, I don't think it's defined as continuous right now in this draft. It is in the current regulations. I believe that's what Mike pointed out. But I don't think we've defined frontage as continuous in the draft. Let me quickly dive into the definitions. You guys talk amongst yourselves.
You should have someone, you know, have some hold music for us.
Do, 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 do.
Yeah, at least Tara could sing if she wasn't busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys don't want me to sing when I'm distracted because you'll have absolutely no idea what's coming out. It's not under, oh, it's under lot frontage, that's why.
How many more times do you think we're going to have to do these meetings like this? Because I
had wanted to do one more, but I can't imagine it's going to be less than 2 at this pace.
Oh no, I'm not talking. I'm talking about not on Zoom.
For months, Charlene.
That's going to be a while.
Adjust to Zoom. Let's see, lot frontage, the length of the shortest straight line between side lot lines and between side lot lines and located entirely within the lot and passing through any points of the front lot line. In the case of a rear lot, the lot frontage shall be measured at the point closest to the street from which the lot derives its principal access, at which point the minimum lot width for the subject district is met. I've seen better worded definitions. It certainly doesn't say explicitly continuous, but it does say the shortest straight line, which implies continuousness. I don't know. What do you guys want to do there?
Adjourn and think about it.
Yeah, I mean, the best path might be to change that definition and make sure, because you're right, like my eyes glazed over during that definition.
Yeah, I think the definition needs some work regardless.
And maybe within the definition, we address that it need not be, you know, it can be interrupted.
Okay.
I agree.
I've got a note to edit. Okay. Good work, guys. Let's set the next date before everybody falls asleep. I haven't had supper either, so.
Yeah. Tuesdays seem to be okay.
Well, let me just double check my book.
Yeah,
Hold
I
on.
don't know what's going on next Tuesday.
Tuesday's good for me.
Tuesday at 6, people. Good for me. I don't know where Mom is. She's probably upstairs somewhere.
Hey, don't forget you have a meeting Thursday.
Yeah.
16th. What time we setting this for?
We're just holding, we're just making sure that,
Tara.
June 16th, right? Next Tuesday.
It's my daughter's birthday. Oh, not that I see my kids, so.
Have a margarita on them.
Mhm.
That's where I'm going. I'm going upstairs to have a couple shots of tequila.
Why is it that tough for you to handle this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
are there any other meetings we need to be concerned about for the 16th?
I don't have any on mine, but where's Tara? Oh, did she have to go get a calendar?
Oh, maybe she did, maybe she.
I'm assuming that's where she went.
Hopefully we get this all said and done by the 23rd, because the 30th is our last meeting, is the meeting. Oh, the 22nd, 29th.
No, the
22nd's our meeting, isn't it?
Oh, the fourth Monday. Okay, I'm sorry. That's right. Got 5 Mondays.
Did she get booted? Did she get booted off?
I don't think so.
no, she's the host, I think. So we.
She said, from Tara, do you guys think everyone, do you think I'm muted? Yeah, we can't hear you.
All right, we're shot. Okay. Yeah, let's see. Chat disabled, able chat. Come on. Shoot.
I am not.
I'm trying to answer her.
Okay, the 16th, 6 p.m.
Yep.
And then don't forget, we have a special meeting this Thursday at 7 p.m. With that, I will accept one final motion.
Before you make the final motion, Mr. Chair, make sure y'all get the correct ID code, please.
Yeah, of course. I don't know what happened there, John, because it was the one I got, but yeah. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Okay, so the final motion. Mr. Reinke?
I'll make a motion that we end this meeting.
Motion has been made. Seconded by Mr. Hill. Meeting is adjourned at 8:59 p.m. Thanks, guys. See you on Thursday.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.